Hello everyone, this is Tim, and today I'm going to talk about island RPG settings and how those are probably very good for new GMs to start out, especially if they haven't fleshed out a campaign before. And also I'm going to talk a little bit about some published RPG island settings that you could possibly use, take things out of, or just look at as an example for how to do it yourself. So why should you run an RPG campaign on an island? What are the pros and cons? Well, the pros are there's less real estate. There's a lot less mileage out there for you to flesh out. So, like, let's say if you take something the size of Middle-earth, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And yes, it's a published setting, and there's lots of information on it. But then you also have to retain that information. You have to know where things are, places, languages, that sort of thing. When you have an island setting, there's probably a lot fewer cultures, possibly fewer races, fewer kingdoms, fewer political things going on that you have to keep in mind, like this kingdom doesn't like this kingdom, and so forth. And as a new GM, I think that's a good place to start. Another thing to think about, too, is, just because you have an island setting doesn't mean your players aren't going to jump on a ship and go to the mainland, if there is a mainland. So thinking ahead of time can really solve a lot of your, GM nightmares, I guess. Oh crap, they're going to leave the island. You can come up with some sort of like social contract where you say, okay guys, this campaign is going to be set on this island. Please don't go gallivanting off into the oceans. Or you could just have it like an in-setting way of doing that. Like, maybe there's a giant barrier reef that you can't get past, or there's sea monsters, or strange mist that surrounds the island that no one's ever come back from. Perhaps they die screaming whenever they touch it. You can come up with all kinds of ways of having some sort of like barrier around it where you can't get past it. And then the campaign will be set on the island. So here's something you could do. Let's say you're making your own island campaign and you want to start out somewhere. Just pick a island chain somewhere on Earth on a map, like let's say Hawaii, and just make your own version, a fantasy version of Hawaii. Could be completely different cultures and races and setting information, associated with it. But that's a good way to figure out where how mountainous certain parts are, where the volcanoes are, how they're shaped. Or you could also just do something completely different where you just pull out a piece of paper and just start sketching, little squiggly lines, like this is the one island, there's a couple islands over here, and just start from there. What race inhabits this island? What cultures over here? Do they like each other? That sort of thing. And I just think it's a good place to start. Less to know, less to retain. Your players are going to be asking you about everything, so if you know it backwards and forwards, that helps. And maybe even your campaign's just set in around a small town on one of these islands, and maybe they don't even leave that island. If you have enough things going on in that area, maybe threatening that small town, or maybe that small town doesn't like another small town and they're fighting each other. The action will probably keep them entertained and invested in where they are, so maybe they don't have to wander around. So I think sometimes new GMs will think that it has to be epic and it has to be world spanning, this big campaign, and it really doesn't have to be. It can be the story of a few neighborhood friends that get together to defend their small town and the adventures that spring out from that. Maybe that's their home base. My Darv's Hill game, they only really went to was one small town and one city, and the rest of the time was focused on the dungeon site. So maybe you have a giant evil dungeon underneath your island. Who knows? But I wanted to also go through some island settings that are out there that perhaps you can look at and emulate for your own setting. So the first one is Red Tide. You guys can see that. And I'm going to put some links down below. Some of these I think are out of print, and other ones are not. I know this one is still in print. but I'm just going to give you a blurb off the back. A red tide is rising. For 300 years, the last remnants of humanity have clung to the wild green jungles of the Sunset Isles. They have watched the red mist that consumed their world roil 100 miles off the coast, waiting, a beast at bay. But now the crimson dreams are becoming stronger, and the wild Shao tribes of the West howl their hate at the human invaders. Who shall rise to save a world quenched in blood? And this is actually for Labyrinth Lord, but you could probably translate this to any D&D fantasy setting pretty easily. There's a lot of things in here that help you out with the setting, help you generate things, and it's a good example of an island setting. And this is sort of like a post-apocalyptic island setting, sort of like where the rest of the world is destroyed, and this red mist is encroaching, and this island is the last vestige of where humanity is, basically. So that's kind of a nice flavor. And again, they can't really get away from the island; they're kind of trapped. So that's kind of cool. The next setting is, I guess you pronounce this, Jakandor. This is for 2nd edition AD&D. Jakandor Island of War and Jakandor Land of Legend. I believe there is one more book in this setting. I don't have it. I think it's a trilogy. But they just go through here and talk about how there's a sort of sorcerer, magic users that are really into necromancy, and then a barbarian tribe on the other side of the island. They're basically constantly at war. So I'll read the back of this one too. On a rugged island filled with unnatural dangers, fierce and proud barbarians must fight for their lives. The barbarians who call themselves the Nor, driven from their homeland, wanted nothing but freedom and an honorable existence when they landed on the shores of Jakandor. What they found was an island occupied by despicable wielders of vile magic, the Broken People, as the Nor call them, who rely on legions of animated corpses to do their fighting. These enemies represent everything the Nor find hateful and dishonorable, and no clansman will rest until the last of the Broken People has tasted Norman steel. So this basically shows you right off the bat, this is an island setting that has a clear line drawn in the sand. You have the necromancers and then the barbarians, and that's just the conflict. So that's the main thing, and I'm sure you can come up with other stories along the way. And there's a lot more details in these books. The one thing I really liked about these books is just the layout. Just to show you guys, they have this art that's in a V, and then the writing is down the side. I always thought that was kind of neat. But that's an example of an island setting that is basically going, I don't know if you call it a civil war, but a war between two sides, and they're trying to wipe each other off the island. So that's a nice conflict to set up. Maybe in your island setting, there are similar sorts of conflicts where different races are trying to exterminate each other, or some are allying themselves and fighting off unnameable terrors from some plane, perhaps. All right, and the last one, and I might say that this is my favorite island setting, is from Iron Crown Enterprises. And this is for the H.A.R.P, High Adventure Role Playing. I don't know if this one is still available. They were going through some changes recently at ICE, but I really like this setting. It has a gorgeous map that comes with it, and I'll just show you. Hopefully you can see it. I love when game products have maps. Yeah, I think that's all where it looks that up. Just a gorgeous map, and you can see that this is sort of like Fantasy Australia. There's like a giant landmass, and then there's just a few islands off here to the side and to the north. It has all kinds of areas on it. So even if you just go at this product and just swipe this map, you can come up with your own details for where everything is. There's lots of interesting subplots and sub areas on here. I ran an entire campaign on one of the very small northern islands that had just one little entry talking about how they were sort of these vampire-esque elves, and I just ran with it. And I think it was a play-by-post game, but I'll read you the back on this as well. High above the dry, desolate wastelands, the griffins sleep. Do you dare wake them? Cyradon, a continent in the Griffin World, is a brand new world setting for H.A.R.P and Rollmaster fantasy role-playing. I don't know if they ever got the Rollmaster one out. Far away under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars stands an ancient city built in a time before the empires of the north fell. Nestled in a mountain range at the center of a vast desert wasteland, the city is carved into the remnants of a dormant volcano. In the highest reaches of that city, in rooms carved from the mountains, the griffins watch and wait. Cyradon is waiting. The long-forgotten things stir in their sleep. On Cyradon, elvish kingdoms strive to carve out an existence on the borders of a continent petrified by magical fire through political intrigue and martial might. In the cracks and forgotten places, the gnomes struggle to preserve what life there is, as well as restore the damage done by the great cataclysm. So again, this has a little bit of a post-apocalyptic feel to it. There's a wasteland in the center. To the west, the civilized, literate Nagazi lizardmen guard the ancient knowledge of the Mithrans. And Mithrans is sort of these ancient culture that a lot of the races have spawned from, that may be the key to the salvation of Cyradon. Most of the griffins keep to themselves in their eyries, setting only their exiles and cast-offs to stand guard over the ruins of the forgotten city. How will the races of Cyradon react to a new influx of humanity and other races? Will the humans choose to stay here, since the world they knew was shattered? And in this setting, there's lots of magical portals, I think they're called roadways here, that all these other places in the setting, in the globe, have opened, and they redirect whoever walks through them to this ancient city in the middle of the wasteland. And that's a nice way of, taking a bunch of people and races from different places and dropping them into the same place. So it makes a lot of sense to have, all these various races that wouldn't normally get along. You throw them into a terrible situation. This desolate city, there's no food, desert all the way around it, strange magical effects going on, and the only real intelligent race are these griffins, which are actually playable races in this setting, which is kind of different. But I think it was a lot more fun to have everyone be humans or elves, dwarves, or whatever, even some stranger races if you wanted to, that show up in this horrible setting, and survival is the main theme at first. And then after a while, they explore out. Hopefully they survive getting through the wasteland, and then they'll start to encounter these other cultures. And what's pretty wild is, depending on what way they want to go, they're going to bump into different cultures, different races. So in that situation, it would be good to know the setting. Like I said, just know the setting inside and out. And no matter what direction the party went into, you would have something ready. You would know what to prepare. And for a while, you'd have wasteland encounters to come up with before they even got to anywhere else. So what am I trying to say with all this is, if you're a new GM and you want a new setting, probably published settings are the easiest way to go, but that isn't always the best way to. There are examples, and even when I do use published settings, I always add my own flair to it. So you could do that. Or you really could just start out from scratch, draw your squiggly lines, or base it off some real-world island chain, and then just start populating it with monsters or intelligent races, and figure out how they get along, how the political lines on the map influence things, what kingdoms are allied with each other. And if you start to think about things in a realistic manner, with a fantastic edge, of course, it'll start to take on a life of its own. Your island setting will start to feel like it breathes, and it will no longer be like your choice. It'll just make sense. Like, okay, this race is like this, and they've done this in the past. So if they were suddenly thrust up against another kingdom, the explorers from each kingdom, bump into each other, how would they react to one another? And depending on how you've made things so far, it'll kind of tell you what happens. It's a pretty cool feeling when you're making a setting. And I know world building kind of intimidates a lot of people. I've known that from my own experience and outside here, YouTube, and trying to get people to work to world build together. It's tough. So good luck to you. island settings, if you want to start out somewhere, that's probably a good place to start. And just to review again, Cyradon is one setting. Jakandor is another. And Red Tide is the last one. Thanks for watching, and good luck to you out there in the gaming world. See ya.